We've been warned before about junk mail and online scams offering cash prizes or bogus inheritance windfalls in exchange for money up front. And many of the criminal gangs behind them come from Nigeria. But a BBC investigation has now found that thousands of these scammers are, in fact, now based here in the UK.
Yes, and George Nicholas was one victim. He was targeted at his home. He lives in Greece. He lives in Athens by a gang who said he'd won the UK sweepstake lottery. And they told him he had to send them money before they could release his winnings.
The thing that I had to do is to send 500 euros. I said that the bank has not yet contacted me for the receipt of my winning prize. Of course, I have done mistakes. I admit that. I have done mistakes because they have the technique to persuade. I became foolish. I feel very bad. But on the other side, the first one whom I have to blame is myself.
George Nicholas there. Well, our reporter Anna Adams has been looking into this, and she's joined by Jennifer Perry, who runs a website for victims of internet fraud. Morning to both of you. So it's really thousands of people doing this based in the UK, is that right?
Yes, there are, and the reason that they can get away with it, as it were, is because the police don't have jurisdiction. They only have jurisdiction in their own country. These scammers that are based here in the UK target people like George outside of the UK, so the police are virtually powerless to do anything about it, coupled with the fact that most people are actually too embarrassed to own up to this. There's a lot of shame attached to it, and police estimate that only 8% of victims actually do come forward.
Well, Jennifer, George himself said the first person I've got to blame is myself, really. And you do wonder how widespread this is and why people are still falling for it.
Well, I think it's very difficult because you have things like the Reader's Digest sweepstakes, which is a legitimate sweepstakes, and
but they don't ask for money up front, do they?
Yeah, but in past history, you know, we've had a lot of these competitions and sweepstakes, and they're just naive users. And until we get used to internet and internet-type scams, we'll see victims fall for this over and over again.
Anna, you've tracked some of these people down, haven't you?
Yeah, we did. We went out to Athens to meet George. We looked through all of his documentation. In a lot of these emails, it's hard to believe that someone might fall for this, but when you see the extent that these scammers go to draw you in, I can see sometimes how people would fall for it. We then checked the email account. It wasn't obviously who it was in the name of who it was purported to be. We found a man called Icon Wuka who runs an internet cafe actually in London. We then went to the internet cafe with all our evidence and asked him exactly what had been going on.
And then confronted him?
We did, yes.
Gosh.
Jennifer, you help victims of these online frauds. How many of them actually get their money back?
Very few of the what we call the Nigerian frauds get their money back because they're done by wire transfer, and once that wire goes, the money's gone and they don't get their money back.
And once you track, if you do manage to track people down who are doing this, are you saying that there's no comeback against them criminally, legally?
Well, police are in a pretty difficult position because of the jurisdiction issues, but the one thing they can get them on, if they've got enough evidence, is money laundering, because these are organised criminal gangs, and a lot of this money is going between countries, and so money laundering is one thing that the police, if they have enough evidence, can get a conviction on.
And the biggest fraud area is actually the online auctions, isn't it, Jennifer? Tell us a little bit about how that works.
Well, online auctions are smaller amounts of money, and therefore the police don't tend to investigate small amounts of money. And those scammers are more opportunistic versus organized. And it is a big problem everywhere, wherever the online auctions operate.
How do they work? How do people get tracked?
They have several different scams. One would be you order something and they send an empty box, but because they have a tracking number, the way that current system works,